S4, and welcome to today's webinar on opportunities for U.S. higher education at TradeWinds 2019. I'm thrilled to have two experts with me here today, Andrew Edelson from the U.S. Department of Commerce and Lakshmi Iyer, also from Sannam S4. Just real quick on Sannam S4, we're a global market entry firm operating in over 20 different markets. And we specialize in international higher education. And in India specifically, we are the leading consultancy for higher education. Just to go in a little bit of a preview of what we'll be doing here this morning. First, I'll introduce both Lakshmi and Andrew. Lakshmi will then give a presentation specifically on opportunities for U.S. higher education in India. I'll then turn it over to Andrew, who will focus specifically on TradeWinds Indo-Pacific 2019, which is a major mission that the U.S. Department of Commerce is pulling together at the beginning of May. He'll have more details on that. After their presentations, we'll have the remainder of the hour for Q&A. But for Q&A, I would suggest that you submit your questions throughout as they come up. Last webinar that I did, we had over 170 participants, so we weren't able to answer every question during the webinar itself, but we were able to kind of follow up. So if we don't get to your questions within this session, we'll certainly follow up. Also, in terms of a follow-up, we'll send the recording of the webinar as well as the presentations themselves. For this, we currently have 34 people in the room. We had over 100 registrants, and one of the reasons why we decided to do this webinar was the specific interest within the U.S. higher education community in the India market specifically. So I'll turn it over to Lakshmi and Andrew after a very short introduction. So first, Lakshmi Iyer, she's the Executive Director for Higher Education at Sannam S4 and leads the global team of higher education consultants. In the last 4 weeks, she's been hard to keep track of in Dubai. She was in the UK and London for a little bit, and then across the US, speaking at various different conferences. So I know she's going to be on point because she's delivered this presentation, I think, several times in the last few weeks. So we're really happy to have her with us. Also, I have Andrew Edelson. Andrew's with the U.S. Department of Commerce and Foreign Commercial Service based out of New Delhi. He's supported by a team of experts across the U.S. Foreign Commercial Service's 7 offices in India. Noella Montero and Shibu Matthews are just two of his colleagues that focus on higher education specifically. Aside from India, the U.S. Department of Commerce has Gabriela Zelia, who leads their higher education desk and the over 100 USIACs across the U.S. market. So the TradeWinds information, you'll receive that towards the end of this presentation. But all of the local U.S. export assistance centers will also have ample information. So if you haven't been in touch with your local USIAC, that's definitely something I'd encourage you to do, and something we'll have our contact details afterwards. We would be happy to put you in touch with your local contact. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Lakshmi. Lakshmi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. I'm going to spend probably the next 20-25 minutes walking you through what the current situation is in India, highlighting some of the opportunities that have emerged in the last 4 years under this government. As you know, we are going into an election mode in the next couple of months. We are awaiting the announcement of the dates. So obviously that has thrown up a bit of ambiguity and uncertainty around a lot of initiatives, and we are going to focus the presentation around obviously the higher education opportunities that are there. So the agenda for today's presentation is going to be on the impact of the upcoming general elections on Indian and American institutions, the current trends that you can see with respect to student mobility from India to various countries overseas. What are some of the mechanisms that the government has announced to enable institutional collaborations? And we will finally end with some trends that we are noticing and 3 case studies of collaboration in the recent past. So, of course, all of us are quite eagerly awaiting the announcement of the election dates, which will happen in India staggered over a period of 6 to 7 weeks. The election obviously will have a wide-ranging impact on a variety of fronts, and higher education being a very important piece in that. So what is the story so far as this government is concerned on the government spending on education? So India sadly spends just 2% of our GDP on education. However, the government does have a target of upping this to 6% of our GDP. And this has happened primarily because there is this ambition that we want to be a developed economy in the coming years, and we also are very conscious of the enormous kind of infrastructure development that we need to do in higher ed, as well as in a variety of fields like health. So there is awareness that the current spending is very low and that we need to kind of move this forward. Now, in terms of what this is going to lead us to is that this government had made a whole host of promises in its manifesto. And if you look at how we could characterize that approach of this government, it has been around reforming the academic and the administrative framework that we currently have. Most of these initiatives have been initiated through executive orders and have really not gone through the parliament in many cases. And the focus areas have been autonomy, reducing the, ensuring that some of these organizations that are involved in capacity building and also funding are not kind of dependent on government grants. And there has been an extraordinary focus on self-reliance and building of capacity from within. Obviously, there have been new organized institutions that have been announced. So we have had 7 new Indian Institutes of Management, 6 new IITs. There have been initiatives to allow graded autonomy to 60 odd institutions, and also the much touted about Institution of Eminence initiative that got a lot of publicity, which we all thought would result in 20 institutes of eminence emerging, but sadly only 6 came out of which 1 doesn't even exist at this point in time. It was a greenfield project that bagged the title. We have had throughout the time that this government has been in power a lot of discussions and also 2 rounds of policy building around a new education policy. India hasn't had a new education policy in the last 3 decades or so, which means that curriculum has changed the world over. We now have artificial intelligence and machine learning, but our curricula needs to kind of keep up keep the pace up, but we haven't kind of had a new education policy. So there is a policy that has been on the anvil for the last 4 years at least. It has undergone 2 iterations, and the new education policy now will probably see the light after a new government comes into power mid of this year. We also have some legislations that are on the anvil to set up a higher education Commission of India, which will subsume a whole host of bodies that work around granting of funds to institutions. So we do have a University Grants Commission that exists. The current government has been talking about subsuming this body under a higher education commission. Again, that has to go through Parliament, and this has also not kind of gained the momentum that they would have ideally liked to have. There is, of course, the announcement of the additional institutes of eminence, where we are told a list of 30 institutions has been sent, but that list again has not been announced. So much as education has been one of the central kind of areas where the government has kind of come out with a lot of initiatives, they have not really managed to gather the momentum that many of us would have ideally liked to have, and would have actually thought when this government came to power would happen. That hasn't happened under the current circumstances. So what is that kind of looking like? So if the current government comes back to power, we are expecting that they will focus again on enabling the institutions by giving more autonomy. There will be more privatization that can happen. There will be increased focus and funding around research and development. India is very ambitious when it comes to climbing the rankings ladder. There is also this competition with China, and constantly looking at China and seeing where China is funding its institutions and wanting to fuel that level of growth in the Indian institutions. The Study in India program will gather momentum. We are going to have a rationalization functioning of multiple agencies. So the fate of Universities Grants Commission hangs in balance, I would say. There will be selective internationalization. I don't think there is going to be allowing foreign universities to set up branch campuses in India, because higher education remains a very emotive topic, and it would be about capacity building of Indian institutions, primarily the state universities. Mandatory accreditation will be an important aspect. So Modi government has always been talking about minimum governance, but we have also seen during the time of this regime that government has laid down very stringent guidances around accreditation. There will be diversification in terms of revenue sources. Institutions will be expected to raise more funds, so they would have to become more agile and become more in sync with global practices around running of the institution here. So it will all not be dependent on receiving government funding, and standardization around what we do in terms of training of our students, and an increased focus on skills. Now, if the current government does come back to power, we still think that there will be some of the schemes which this government has announced, they will continue, because they have a track record of continuing some of the initiatives from the previous government. So the UPA-led government had some fantastic initiatives around improving the standards of state universities, which the current government has continued. And I think we will see that trend going forward if it is the opposition parties that come to power. And we feel that there will be strategic funding for state universities as a result of that. But there could also be a repackaging and relaunch of some of the pet schemes of the present dispensation. That then kind of leads me to request you to consider some of the current trends that we are seeing in terms of the international student recruitment from India. As you know, India happens to be the second largest source country for many of the recipient nations, including the United States. Indian students form approximately 18% of the international population of students within the United States. And within India, if you look at what we are seeing, the numbers are mind-boggling. So the tertiary student population has increased sixfold in approximately 22 years that we have seen, and this is expected to grow to almost 140 million students by 2030. So the number of students coming through the system as they mature, those numbers of students, our current kind of institutions just don't have the capacity to absorb or train. And since 1990, we have had an explosive growth in universities and also colleges and technical institutions. Those figures are there to see on the slide. I just want to pick up just the number of colleges that we have opened. So in 8 years, between 2008 and 2016, we opened 18,000 colleges. That is at the rate of 6 colleges per day. So, the number of institutions that we have opened is phenomenal, but the challenge that we have had has been around quality. Also, the gross enrollment ratio in India is abysmal. It's just at 25%, though we have ambition to cross 30% in the coming years. And I also want to kind of, draw your attention to the supply-demand dynamics that we see here. So as of now, there are 37 million students in our tertiary level institutions, and we would need around 2,400 universities to train the 140 million students whom we are expecting to see by 2030. So it's very clear that this kind of supply, to absorb that supply, we just don't have the wherewithal to build that many brick and mortar solution within India. Now that has also kind of led to a serious drawback in the system, which is in terms of the quality of education that we are offering. And in the last decade or so, there has been the rise of the private higher educational institutions in India. So you are looking at private universities growing at the rate of the number of private universities that are emerging. They are growing at the rate of 25% year on year. And at the same time, the state-funded institutions are probably growing at the pace of about 6 to 7%. Private universities have really kind of changed the dynamic around higher education. They are no longer treated as stepchildren. They do have access to funds. Some of them are built with the ethos of internationalization from day one, so that the whole culture of internationalization is very much in their DNA. And the newer new age private universities are coming out with the ethos of emphasizing on research and learning and development. And the public higher educational institutions have got a shortage of well-trained faculty, have crumbling infrastructure. The curriculum is just not in sync with what is required, because, as you know, we are currently facing a situation where we are training students for jobs that we don't even know what they are going to be in the next decade or so, because of automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on. And many of the public sector institutions, other than, of course, the islands of excellence that you see with respect to Indian institutes of science and IITs and so on, have very subpar research culture. So these are some of the background situations that really kind of have led middle class students and parents to consider destinations overseas. As you know, from the 1970s, Indians have steadily, bright Indians from middle class families and above have steadily chosen to kind of go and study overseas. And now you see that percolating down to all strata of society. Education remains very much a very emotional and a very high value investment for Indian parents and also students. And as people, we are very much return on investment focused. And US has always been the #1 destination for India. But having said that, in the last decade or so, Indian students are more adventurous, are more aware of options all over the world, and are expanding their horizons. So you now see Indian students going from India to destinations as diverse as China on the east, to the United States on the west. Obviously, the numbers to some of the emerging destinations are not as what the US has seen out of India, but those countries are really kind of they're arriving, are throwing scholarships at Indian students, and they do make it very clear that there are policies of welcoming Indian students and researchers because they do see the value that the Indian researcher and student would bring to the ecosystem. And the students from India, as always, they are very focused on employability. They are increasingly kind of enrolling in private higher education institutions. And on an average, every year on year, Indians are spending a substantial amount on tuition fees and living expenses overseas. Just looking at tuition fees, we have spent in 2018 at least $3 billion just on tuition fees, and the impact of over 180,000 students in the US economy, for example, is estimated to be a little over $7 billion. And these are students, individuals who are choosing specialized courses because in India, employability is still very much a factor. Students are looking at what it is that would make them sort of bulletproof when it comes to jobs. And right now, we see this trend towards students choosing machine learning, cloud computing, climate change and sustainability. These are the kind of hot topics, and Indian students are very much keen to look at these kinds of topics. So obviously, we are the second largest sending country worldwide. But if you look at that outbound population as a percentage of our tertiary level student population, it is minuscule. It is under 1%. Only 0.9% of Indian students at the tertiary level actually choose to go overseas. So you can imagine, the size of the potential, untapped potential that is there. Just, I wanted to also set the scene in terms of where US is at this point in time. It, of course, is the #1 destination for Indian students, but we have seen the rise of Canada in the last 2.5 years. Canada is really booming in India. So is Australia, and they have really benefited from. Indian students are quite quick to get spooked if they see that there aren't kind of opportunities in the immediate horizon for staying back and working and building the ability to pay back, in many cases, the education loan that they would have taken, it becomes a problem, and students then look at destinations that would give them that opportunity. And I think Canada and Australia are currently considered as very favorable destinations with respect to immigration. And the US has always benefited from Indian students naturally navigating to US as a study destination, but suddenly US is finding itself in a position where it has to compete very actively in market to attract the attention of the Indian student, because every other country is here in India at this point in time wanting to meet and offer places to Indian students. So here are some examples, but I would really like to focus my attention on the European destinations. We have seen the rise of Europe as a preferred choice for many Indian students in the last 5 years, and they have become increasingly very active in the last 2.5 years or so, with more and more programs being offered in English. We have had the first mutual recognition of qualifications signed between India and France. Campus France has just run one of the biggest education shows in the recent memory. In the last kind of 2 weeks or so, they have had enormous levels of interest from Indian students. Germany, of course, Germany as a country has been engaged with India for over 50 years, and DAAD has done, German Academic Exchange has done a phenomenal job of promoting Germany as a study destination, and they attract the cream of India's STEM-focused students. So there are all of these countries which are non-Anglophone countries generally now kind of hustling and giving English-speaking countries a run for their money in terms of attracting the attention of the Indian students. As a snapshot, I would say that India is quite an agent-driven market. There are emerging cities. Gone are the days when you could kind of come and visit 6 metro locations and go back home thinking that you have covered India. You are talking of another 42 emerging cities. So today, if you want to really effectively cover India, you're talking of kind of visiting at least 50 locations. Any agent with a well-established network has got between 25 to 40 offices and are opening offices every other month in newer locations that are emerging in India. So the story has kind of moved away from tier 1 and probably even the tier 2 cities, and the story of attracting new students from newer locations, we would say they are coming out of the tier 3 cities at this point in time. There are also new schools that are coming up in locations further and further away from the metro cities. So that is where now the recruitment game is. And there is this push towards the south of India, and US has always attracted a lot of students from the south of India. But then other countries are now actively pushing towards the south of India on the lookout for quality and STEM-focused students. And the pursuit of higher education remains the dream of majority of middle-class parents, and it is, as I said earlier, it's a high investment and a highly emotional topic for most Indian parents, and it remains a front-page item in our newspapers. This then, I just wanted to draw your attention on some of the government announced and also funded mechanisms to enable institutional collaborations that exist in India at this point in time. One is around increased autonomy. So you have the institutes of eminence, you have the graded autonomy, and the RUSA scheme. The RUSA scheme is largely around improving the capacity of our state-funded universities which have always suffered from a paucity of funds. So the government has been actively funding our state universities and enabling them to collaborate with foreign universities. And the research internationalization has suddenly taken center stage in the last 5 years, I would say. So you have a variety of schemes, like the Scheme for Promotion of Academic and Research Collaboration, which is SPARC, which enables faculty and student mobility between Indian and foreign institutions. We have got Imprint, which is impacting research, innovation, and technology for specifically around engineering challenges. So the funding here is divided across 10 domains, and there are 425 projects that the government has promised to fund under the scheme. Then you have the Vajra, which is the Visiting Advanced Joint Research to enable foreign faculty to work with Indian institutions in helping them improve their research capabilities. And worldwide, as we know, social sciences have got a bad name, saying that students are not getting jobs, but that is not the way it is in India. We have the Impactful Policy Research in Social Science, which is the IMPRESS scheme, which looks at funding social science projects across identified domains. So there are enough and more projects that are there, which foreign institutions can really consider when it comes to working with Indian institutions, and that is a sea change from what it used to be a few years ago. So what do these reforms mean for American institutions? Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we have had a growth of private universities. When the government has actively announced these autonomy-focused reforms, that would mean that it becomes very easy for foreign institutions to prospect. So let's just take the idea of the graded autonomy list. So you are looking at having 60 odd institutions that have made into the graded autonomy list, and suddenly institutions need not prospect 900 universities. You at least could start with 60 universities that have more autonomy to enter into collaborations with foreign institutions, and also have funding to back that. So, you have a go-to list that you could use as a starting point if you are considering working with Indian institutions. The research and development landscape in India has become really interesting. Unfortunate thing is that, if somebody were to look at the top to 2,000 odd companies that spend in R&D area, there are only 26 Indian companies compared to China's 300 odd companies that spend a fortune in research and development. And in India, private sector, the focus is quite narrow. We just fund pharmaceutical research. There is funding around auto research and also in software. So the funding domain, if you were to kind of map that out, you would find that it is quite restrictive. But there is this recognition that for India to kind of rise up as a power, we need to really focus on research and development, and also develop our own IP. So as we know, there are challenges around patent filing in India. Though we are the 7th largest patent filing office in the world, more than 70% of the Indian origin patents, they have been filed outside of India, and there is this recognition that we need to do something about it, and we need to kind of beef up our laws around protection of IP to give comfort to foreign organizations to work effectively in the ecosystem that we have. Having said that, India offers a phenomenal laboratory for organizations and institutions that are interested in working on food security, climate change, sustainability, public health, and well-being. And these are, and also India is one of the first signatories to the International Solar Alliance. So there are a lot of initiatives where the government has put money where its mouth is, and these are all not just challenges unique to India. These are, I would say, global challenges that humanity faces, and India offers the best laboratory for all of these. So, there are unbelievable partnership opportunities, but they are not without impediments. I would not want to read out all of these impediments, but there are restrictions that institutions need to be aware of around tax exemptions, foreign currency regulations that are there. There need to be a lot more clarity around foreign direct investments, executive education and online training and so on. And the other big initiative that the government has looked into is corporate social responsibility, CSR funding. So Indian companies have, beyond a certain size, have to set aside a certain percentage of their profits for this, and and there is money available in some of these areas. So where does that so what are the kind of trends that we are seeing? Of course, the reform agenda is going to continue, is our prediction. There will be continued investment in the higher ed space, but then employability is a critical area of focus. We have the world's largest under the age of 25 years of age population. We have 600 million people who need to be fed, clothed, and they have to find jobs. And the rise of the private universities is something that we need to watch very closely, because that is where the next big move is going to be. And obviously there are disruptors. So the online space, which is how India will need to build her capacity and capability, that remains very much an important piece. The influence of artificial intelligence, and also this whole idea around personalization and contextualization of content, so far as the Indian student is concerned, because they are becoming more discerning in terms of how they absorb knowledge and how they teach themselves. And there is this debate around whether degrees are valid for the future workforce, or do they need to do stackable qualifications that will make them more employable. Having said that, there are a whole host of, we are seeing a new wave of initiatives that will enable more and more institutions to consider working with Indian institutions. I have brought here 3 case studies. One is around executive MBA, which is being run in collaboration with IIT Bombay by Washington University in St. Louis. And they've already had 4 cohorts of students graduating, and are being successful in the workforce. And we are only going to see more and more of such initiatives being welcomed here. We have recently seen University of Queensland putting funding for a period of 10 years to enable 360 PhD graduates to emerge out of their collaboration with IIT Delhi. And the other initiative that I want to look at is the UC San Diego academic and industry collaboration, where the Tata Trusts have funded projects in genetics. So, a whole host of such initiatives are emerging, and the future does look quite bright so far as the opportunities here are concerned. So, when you are talking about the whole India story, of course, there is a huge gap. It's all about the big H, huge gap, but then, we also have huge potential. There is a huge demand in terms of, higher education. But we also, there is also this huge risk of if we do not fix our higher education challenges, our demographic dividend, which is huge, could also turn into a huge deficit. Having said that, the potential that our youth population offers more than offsets that risk. So at that, I would like to stop, and if there are questions at the end of this, after we have had the next speaker, I'm more than happy to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lakshmi. You know, I love India for several reasons. One is you said there's another 40 emerging cities, which is just kind of astounding. I think the other thing, I don't know if everybody can hear it, but I have a Bollywood wedding happening outside my apartment right now. So if there's any extra noise, I apologize. A couple of things before I turn it over really quickly to Andrew to go through trade wins. The U.S. government is really, you know, we're tracking closely and is doing a lot more in terms of focus on U.S.-India higher education collaboration. So just earlier this week, they launched Partnership 2020, which will work towards creating a searchable database of joint partnerships in key areas like AI and renewables, an updated list of relevant public-private grants, a guide for cross-border partnerships, and policy recommendations to help support the further higher education collaboration, specifically in the area of research, which is one of the areas that our team here in India covers quite closely. So I think with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew, who will go into kind of Trade Winds Indo-Pacific, which is the major mission that's coming up in May and will be a great opportunity for higher education institutions to come take a look at India and the surrounding region. So with that, Andrew, over to you. I'll go on mute.
Okay, thank you, Michael. First of all, am I coming through loud and clear? Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check. Thanks, Michael, for that introduction, and thank you, Lakshmi, for that great overview of the education market in India. As a quick reintroduction of myself, so my name is Andrew Edlifson. I'm a commercial officer with the Foreign Commercial Service based here in the embassy in Delhi, India. If you're not familiar with the commercial service and what we do, I'm sure some of you have worked with our U.S. offices before, but I don't have a slide on the commercial service and what we do, but I just want to briefly introduce who we are so you have a better sense. So the commercial service is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and it's essentially the export promotion arm of the U.S. government. So through our global offices, including offices in close to 80 countries, and we have over 100 offices throughout the U.S. in our export assistance centers. We basically act as a global network of consultants and facilitators and experts on various industries and exporting U.S. products and services around the world. And of course, education is an important industry for us. And India is an important market for us. We see lots of opportunities here for U.S. education providers. If you want to learn more about the commercial service and what we do, please visit export.gov, and you can also find out there where your nearest, the office is nearest to you. And they're a great point of contact to tap into our services and resources. But I want to thank Sannam for organizing this webinar. Sannam has been a tremendous partner for us here in India, particularly in the education sector, as far as providing research intel and assistance to U.S. education providers and helping us at the commercial service and what we're doing to promote U.S. education here in India. But I'm here tonight, this morning, to introduce Trade Winds Indo-Pacific Forum Mission 2019. This is a big event organized by the U.S. Department of Commerce. It happens in different cities or different countries every year. This is the 11th year that we've held Trade Winds, and we're very excited to be hosting it here in India. So in my presentation, I'm going to go through really quickly the history and objectives of Trade Winds, what we're trying to accomplish by organizing this event, look at kind of the size and scope of what it's about, and look at the schedule that we're planning for here in May, and also how U.S. Companies and educational institutions can participate and provide different kinds of support, and also the great publicity opportunities that the U.S. Participants have in this event. So I'm going to jump right into what Trade Winds is, where it came from, and why it's an important event for U.S. businesses and educational institutions. So as I mentioned, Trade Winds is now in its 11th year. This is the first time we've held it here in India. It started back in 2008 in Turkey, and it's really grown exponentially over the years as more and more U.S. Businesses and institutions have learned about it and realized the value that it has. But you can see on the screen the different countries that we've held Trade Winds in. It's a wide variety of different types of markets and regions of the world. And you know, here in India, we see great opportunities in many different industries, including the education sector. And again, we're excited to be hosting it here this year. Basically, what Trade Winds is a large-scale mission, or trade mission, where we will bring a large group of U.S. businesses and institutions to India to basically educate them on the opportunities here and introduce them to some potential partners and buyers through various matchmaking meetings and programs that we have going on at Trade Winds. The dates for the Trade Winds program this year are May 6th through the 13th. It's going to start off with everybody arriving on Sunday, May 5th, with the program beginning on May 6th through 8th, which will be a business forum here in Delhi. We'll also be organizing some B2G meetings, some networking events, a reception with the U.S. Ambassador to India, Ambassador Juster. And it's a great opportunity, a way to launch the Trade Winds is to do a kind of a comprehensive forum and conference here in Delhi, the capital. So those May 6th through 8th, it will be here in Delhi. However, following the program here in Delhi, the mission will split off into different cities, 6 different cities throughout India, each of where we have a presence. The commercial service has a presence, and we will be organizing B2B meetings for the U.S. participants, depending on which cities they want to visit and what types of companies they're hoping to meet with. So these 6 locations include Mumbai, Chennai, Bengaluru, Kolkata, Hyderabad, and Ahmedabad. So that will be after the Delhi portion. We'll split off into these 6 cities for B2B meetings. Following that, we're also including 2 stops outside of India, including Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, where again we will be setting up B2B meetings for U.S. participants looking to get into these markets. So that's a quick snapshot of the Trade Winds program this year. As you can see, it encompasses a lot, and it'll be a very busy week. But again, we see this as a great opportunity and program particularly for those U.S. Participants who are new to the India market, and also for those who have been here before but really haven't gotten their feet wet here yet. So that's just a quick snapshot of the program. So the fees we're charging for U.S. participation in this, if you include the forum on the first few days, plus one mission stop in one of the cities that I just listed. For SMEs, it's $2,200. If you're larger than an SME, it's $4,200. And then each additional mission stop beyond that will be $1,000, and additional representatives will be $500. However, if you just plan to attend the forum, the first few days in Delhi, that's only $650. A quick note, though, however, since we've already been promoting and recruiting companies for the TradeWinds mission, actually the registration deadline for the full program, including the B2Bs in the split off cities, is actually ends this Friday, March 8th. However, if anyone on the call is very interested in participating in this TradeWinds mission, you can email me, and my contact information will appear at the end of my presentation. But you can email me, let me know that you're interested, and I can work with our TradeWinds office and staff to see if we can get you registered for the full program. However, if you're only interested in the forum in Delhi, then registration for that ends, I believe, on April 30th. So there's still some time to register for that. You can see some of the sponsors that we have supporting this TradeWinds event. We're still looking for additional sponsors. Of course, you can see Sannam S4 up there as one of our larger sponsors, and we appreciate their support. But if you're interested in supporting this event and being a sponsor, I can provide you more information on that and how to be a sponsor. There are lots of exposure and publicity opportunities for participants in the TradeWinds event. All attendees and sponsors will receive a press release to distribute to local area and trade press. We'll be providing toolkits with media content, graphics, and key accounts. We'll be uploading event photos to Flickr daily. Past missions have been covered in media such as CNBC, Bloomberg, and Voice of America. And I would also highlight that we will have a lot of high-level Department of Commerce staff in attendance at this TradeWinds event. So that's a great opportunity, particularly in the networking sessions, to get to meet with our high-level commerce officers. Again, to learn more about what Commerce is doing and how we can be helping U.S. companies and educational institutions. For more information on the TradeWinds mission, I would refer you to the website export.gov/TradeWinds, or you could email our TradeWinds team at tradewinds@trade.gov. Or if you'd like to just email me directly, my email will appear on the last slide. Feel free to send me your information and questions, and I'd be happy to address them. Again, this is just talking about our sponsorship opportunities and the packages that we offer. Again, it's a great way to get exposure at this large-scale event and mission. And it will have a great impact, not only on your educational institution and your business, but also on the overall TradeWinds event itself. And I'd be happy to, again, send you a flyer with more information on sponsorship packages. So I'm not sure if I went over time, but I wanted to thank you, all the participants on the webinar today. Thank you for taking the time to learn about the higher education market in India, and about TradeWinds 2019. We hope that some of you can think about participating this year, and feel free to shoot me an email if you are interested. We can possibly get you registered beyond the deadline if it's possible. But I also wanted to, and I neglected to at the start, to recognize the great mission team that we work with here in the commercial service in India. I believe we have on the webinar today Noel, who's our lead specialist in education for India. She's based in Mumbai. And also Shabu Matthews, who I work with here in Delhi on the education sector. We have a really great team and strong team, and we're dedicated to helping, U.S. education providers identify opportunities and students and partnerships here throughout India. So with that, I just would like to thank everyone for participating, and look forward to hearing from each of you with your questions about TradeWinds, and hopefully that we'll get some of you involved this year. And with that, I'll go ahead and finish up my presentation, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for all the questions that have been rolling in. If you haven't had it to ask them, please drop your questions in, and we'll be sure to follow up with answers. Seeing that we only have a couple of minutes left, I'll just take one or two, and then we'll wrap up. One quick one for Andrew. Back to the slide in terms of the costing for TradeWinds. Is there a different cost for higher education institutions, or how would that fit for them?
So thank you. Yeah. So the participation fees are really based on the size of the organization, whether it be a business or a manufacturer or a school. So the fees are really uniform as far as the size. So if you're considered, and if I could go back to the slide real quick, I could refer to that.
There it is.
Yeah. So if you're considered an SME, which I believe is 500 plus employees, then you would qualify for that rate. But if you're above that, then you would be the higher rate, a large company.
Okay, great. And a couple of people asked if we will be sharing the decks. Yes, we will in the coming days. We'll also be sharing the webinar itself. We'll upload it onto YouTube and then share the link, so you'll be able to forward it along to other colleagues who may not have been able to join us today. One question I have for you, Lakshmi, and I think tomorrow, I know we're celebrating here International Women's Day. I had a question about what efforts have been done to attract women in STEM in India. I know we are working with one major U.S. university that set up an entrepreneurship center down in Chennai. We helped them set that up, and that's focused specifically on women in entrepreneurship. But women and STEM in India, what's happening in that space, Lakshmi?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. We have kind of in India begun a program here or there to kind of attract girls to science and also retain women in science. So a scheme was launched, to the best of my knowledge, by the Department of Science and Technology in 2017 to attract women, rather girls, to study science. It's called the Vigyan Jyoti scheme. But again, the challenge with this scheme has been the funding. There have been some workshops that have been organized, and camps that have been kind of organized as a result of this bit of funding from Department of Science and Technology to make girls aware of careers in science. But I do think that we have a long way to go to make sure that girls get into STEM. There isn't a concerted effort around this. And that has largely come down to paucity of funds, because year on year there has been a drastic kind of drop in terms of the percentage of women who kind of graduate from science, school to science qualifications, and from there move on to higher level degrees, to doctorates and faculty position within schools and colleges. So there is recognition that there is more to be done, but the efforts have been quite poor, I have to admit.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe just one more question on undergraduate versus graduate. Andrew, and from your perspective, are you seeing? I think historically India has been a post-grad market. But what are you and your team kind of seeing in terms of the undergraduate and graduate breakdown? And then Lakshmi, if you want to jump in after Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And I would invite Noelle, if she's on, to also chime in. But based on what I've seen here in India, traditionally the focus has been on graduate students going to the U.S. to study. But I've seen the trend, the numbers of undergrad students also increasing. I don't think to the scale of graduate students, but we're definitely seeing an upward trend, I think, for undergraduate students. But for the most part, the focus has been on graduate. I don't know if Noella, if you have anything to add to that.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so the experience that we've had working with undergraduate schools, we've seen a couple of community colleges, not a couple, but quite a few community colleges coming to ours and talking to students about how they can do a couple of years with them and then move on to the top school. That idea is kind of picking up, and we have seen colleges, students enroll in community colleges to get to a good graduate schools.
Awesome, thank you. Lakshmi, anything to add?
Yeah, I think India is seeing a growth in the undergrad population. But having said that, I would say that probably about 20% versus 80% focused on grad programs still. But this population is quite discerned. It's quite agnostic when it comes to immigration policies, and the parents are very focused on making sure that the student picks up the right kind of program to suit their future goals, and they have the funding to back that up with. And that population has steadily grown. And hasn't really kind of, taken a downturn as you would see with the grad population when there are changes in immigration policy or changes in job opportunities that people think potentially they could move into. So it is a growing market, and it is very much a market that other countries have also started actively chasing in India.
Thank you. And I realize we're 5 minutes over. Again, the presentations and the webinar itself will be available on YouTube. So we will be sure to follow up in the coming days. And thank you all for joining. Andrew, Noelle, Lakshmi, thank you so much for your presentation and answering everyone's questions today. We do have a few questions that we weren't able to get to, but I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap up now and follow up offline. So thank you everybody for joining, and have a wonderful day ahead. We hope to see you in India in May.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Lakshmi.